was enjoying that very much. It was a bit of a taste of what's actually regularly available to you guys just around the corner from Melbourne University. So we hand it over now to Devamrita Swami.
I thought that happiness would be a topic no one is interested in. Yes, it's true that the subject of happiness has become such an issue. Somehow or other, people today have forgotten how to be happy. What does happiness mean to you? Is it some sudden jolt to your psychology? Is it some intense stimulation to your physiology? Is happiness found in relationships? Or is it something just of the moment that comes and goes so quickly? What's happiness to you? Is it sheer sensuality? Or is it, like the German philosopher Nietzsche said, happiness is when your power and control is expanding and obstacles are overcome? Or maybe, for you, happiness is just possessing in the good old-fashioned way of consumerism. Persons not only possess objects, but they also possess other persons. Happiness has become such a mystery because there are myths associated so deeply with human society today. Now, you would normally not think that myth plays such a role in a modern society. You generally think that myth is something of the primitives. But first, before we deal with your individual quest for happiness, let's look at myths that pervade every aspect of Western society. And as you know, so much of the world is imitating Western society. So much of the world, even India, is trying to adopt what is turning out to be a very flawed method of progress. What are those myths that are so inextricably bound up with what we call a progressive society? First of all, money brings happiness. Everyone, well, almost everyone, would distance themselves from this myth. No, I don't think money brings happiness. Yet in our actions, we see something different. Sometimes people say, all right, money can't buy happiness, but what it can buy, it can rent. Somehow or other, in terms of our relationships, in terms of our lifestyle, money plays such an important role. Back in the day when people would still get married, there was a saying, marry the money, love comes later. Or as my mother taught me when I was 5 years old, I never had a chance to use that advice because I became a Swami, a monk. But she still tried to give me wisdom as she saw best. She taught me romance without finance is a nuisance. Whether we admit it or not, whether we like it or not, money plays such a role in life. If you want to follow where your life's energies are actually flowing, then follow the money trail, no matter how big or small it is, and you'll see what is dominating life in such a major way. Often when we think about this myth that money brings happiness, we excuse ourselves. Look, what do you want out of me? I didn't make the world this way. I'm just trying to cope. I'm just trying to keep my nose above the water. This is called the resignation theory. You know, I'm just a tiny person trying to be good, trying to be nice to others. What more do you want out of me? You see, we have this fear. How can I explain the fear to you? It's more acute than just what is known as the fear of falling back, that you'll achieve less than what your parents achieved, that your level of opulence and wealth will be less than what your parents acquired. I'm talking about something that's even more acute. I think the best way to explain it to you is through your childhood memories. Please raise your hands. How many of you as a kid played the game musical chairs? Raise it. All right. Do you remember what it felt like when the music stopped and you didn't have a chair? Oh, what a horrible feeling, wasn't it? You practically have blanked it out of your memory. That you would be having nothing and others would have it. Remember some of you when the music stopped and you didn't have your own chair, you tried to squeeze onto another kid's chair? So, this is a programming that has affected us so deeply. Many of you know that there is sociological research pointing out that beyond a certain standard of wealth and convenience, luxury, any further increase does not lead to an increase in happiness as measured by standard psychological indicators. I remember speaking about this at the University of Cape Town, generally accepted as the most prestigious institution on the African continent. And there was an audience of about a third the size of what we have here. By the way, our announcer and our singer, they're both from University of Cape Town, in case you didn't catch the accent. We have an international group here. So, I presented to the students and professors gathered there. I'm sure most of you are aware of this research, that beyond what many scholarly researchers say is the middle class standard of living, beyond that, any further increase in wealth or opulence does not lead to an increase in happiness as ordinarily measured. I asked for a show of hands. Almost everyone in the audience of 200 had heard of this research. And then I misbehaved a bit and asked a very impish question. All right, you've heard of this research. Now let me ask you, how many of you plan to not achieve more than a middle-class standard of living in life? Only 2 out of 200 raised their hand. So you see there's a disconnect between what we may know and how we plan to live our life. And this disconnect is very important for us to focus upon, because an intelligent and compassionate human being is concerned. What are we doing to society? What are we doing to the environment? But how does that concern translate into lifestyle adjustment, lifestyle alteration? Ultimately, we want to be happy. And if the necessary lifestyle adjustments interfere with our happiness, the situation becomes difficult. But that's just myth number 1. Money brings happiness. Myth number 2. Technology brings well-being. When I was at Yale University, I studied the history of so many things: history of technology, history of science and medicine. We look at the thousands of nuclear weapons in the world, and then we hear that if just 100 of those thousands of nuclear weapons in the world go off, that's enough to cause climate change that has never been seen in thousands of years. In my home country of old, the USA, I'm a New Zealand citizen these days. There's some reasons for that. We won't go into it here. I can say, my former president of the USA won the Nobel Peace Prize, and then he's a nice guy. He somehow or other got caught up in the usual flow of affairs and put his support behind a 30-year program to modernize the nuclear arsenal of the USA at the cost of $1 trillion US. And then recently, the latest president of the USA, whether you consider him a nice guy or not, he feels that, it's always good to beat up on the USA, not he feels that there needs to be an increase in military spending. Now, try to understand that my old country spends more on the military than the next 8 nations combined. Yet, our present president feels that there needs to be a $58 billion increase in military spending. Something has gone drastically wrong. This idea that technology brings prosperity can also bring about doubts when we look at proliferation of smartphones, social media. Social psychologists have pointed out that this enormous boom in such devices has caused more loneliness than ever before and more depression. Did you know what actually goes on in the minds of your friends when you are at some cafe, you're at some concert, or some social gathering, and you send them a selfie? You know what actually happens? Social psychology pointed out that you are causing depression because the other person gets what you send and feels so bad that he or she is not there. Feels so isolated. So what was meant to bring people together actually pushes them further apart. Especially since it's very difficult to establish a wholesome relationship through these technological methods. Yet, people mistake their internet connectivity with personal connectivity. So I'm explaining these things so we can get a greater idea of myth number 2. Remember myth number 1? Money brings happiness. Myth number 2 is technology brings well-being. Then myth number 3, weapons bring security. In those nations that have huge stockpiles of nuclear weapons, there's a myth that's spread among the people. You ask the average American, what's the point of such a huge nuclear arsenal? And the answer is, we need such a nuclear arsenal in order to protect our freedoms. In other words, these weapons produce a secure way of life for us. Meanwhile, $1 trillion goes to modernizing such an arsenal. And where does that money come from? This is just one example of the illusion that weapons bring security. There's no money for universal health care, as you have in Australia, but there's $1 trillion for modernizing the nuclear arsenal. Because the people are made to think that by having these nuclear weapons, our life is more secure, our freedoms are protected, our rights are guaranteed. Meanwhile, the social fabric becomes more and more tattered. Myth number 4. It's twofold. The earth provides unlimited resources for our exploitation. It's just a tap that just keeps flowing and flowing and flowing. The other half of that myth number 4 is, not only does the earth provide unlimited resources for our exploitation, but the earth provides unlimited sink. Those of you who study environmental science know the term sink. Waste assimilation capacity. So the earth gives unlimited resources, and the earth provides unlimited drainage capacity, so to speak, to assimilate all the waste from manufacturing processes. These 4 myths are the basis of a human species that's become like a virus. In my book, Hiding in Unnatural Happiness, I explain a point very eloquently presented by probably one of the most, if not the most, eminent biologist in the world, E.O. Wilson, Harvard Emeritus. He says that there's only one species in the world that you can extract completely from the biosphere and there'll be no chain reaction. Any other species, even the tiny ants, if you remove them completely from the environment, there'll be chain reactions in terms of extinctions, habitats will be upset. But human beings, pull them out of the world. Not only will there be no negative reaction to the environment, indeed the opposite happens. The environment rejuvenates. How insignificant are human beings? Did you know that you can take all the human beings in the world, and this is a thought experiment, by the way, proposed by Mr. Wilson also. You can lob stack these human beings like sardines in an area that is only 1 cubic mile, 1.6 cubic kilometers. That kind of box, just 1 cubic mile, will accommodate all the human beings in the world. And then you can take that box and disappear it into just one small section of the Grand Canyon. That's how insignificant human beings are in terms of biomass. Yet human beings have become, as you know, a geophysical force. But they want to be happy. Aware persons are thinking, can there be something known as sustainable happiness? When I'm speaking at universities around the world, I find this is becoming the hottest topic. We want to be happy, but how can that happiness be sustainable? How can there be happiness that does not jeopardize other human beings, other species, the environment, and also, how can it not jeopardize future generations? Because as you know, intergenerational tyranny is a great problem. Why should human beings today live in such a way that the future of coming generations is spoiled? This is known as intergenerational tyranny. Why worry about climate change? It really doesn't kick in until 100 years from now. We won't be here. Our kids will figure out how to deal with it. Is there a way to be happy that doesn't cause such a chain reaction of bad consequences for others? Let me speak to you from the viewpoint of the ancient knowledge of India. And I'm going to speak particularly based on the Bhakti texts. The Bhakti Yoga texts focus on the yoga of love and devotion, the ultimate connection with the love supreme. There, it's explained that human life actually begins with the understanding that we are different from our body. That the body and the mind are shells. Our real identity is that of non-material particles of consciousness. When we misidentify with the external, with matter as the self, then everything we do is a mistake because we've made a fundamental error at the very beginning. This axiomatic truth is explained by Krishna at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, the most comprehensive yoga text. There, Krishna explains that just like you change clothes, similarly you change bodies. And the intelligent person never makes the mistake of thinking the clothes are me. Similarly, such an intelligent person never makes the mistake of thinking the body is me. By considering falsely that we are the body, we then line up a whole lifetime, at least one lifetime, a whole lifetime of misdirected, mistaken activities, trying to please something that we're not. And this mistaken pursuit puts such a burden on the earth, such a planetary destructive force is this mistaken drive to be something that you're not and please something that you're not. This is the beginning of the genuine yoga and meditation system, by the way. Many of you are familiar with yoga in terms of postures and breathing exercises, and that's very good for the health. We're not the body, but we have to take care of our equipment. So I also do yoga postures and breathing exercises. But hopefully I don't make the mistake of thinking I'm solving my main issues in life by doing that. I'm taking care of my machinery. The real gift, however, of the yoga and meditation knowledge is the understanding of how we are different from matter, and therefore our needs cannot be satisfied materially. Real studies of happiness begin here. In the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, and by the way, Krishna means the supreme, unlimitedly attractive. Krishna explains that someone who is actually intelligent and educated never makes the mistake of pursuing the temporary stimulations of the body and mind, because such so-called pleasures have a beginning and end. In other words, human life is meant for connecting with the non-material, connecting with that ultimate source of non-material energy. When human society can be organized in this way, then we'll actually see a profound change. And certainly you cannot expect everyone to strive for such goals. But if only a small section of society pursues this, that's enough to make such an extraordinary change. In other words, what I'm saying is that our present human society is grossly misdirected. And many persons are starting to awaken to that reality. How can there be political adjustment, economic adjustment, technological adjustment to solve the problems of the day? It's not working. You have, on one hand, the globalists who say, we are all the world, let's be transnational, let's forget about boundaries and borders, let's have economic integration, let's be multicultural. And then on the other extreme you have the territorialists, the nationalists. We are the nation, and the nation is anyone and everyone who only looks like us, and there should be borders, there should be walls. We don't care about how climate change affects the rest of the world. It's not affecting right here, right now. You have a clash between these two. Which one is right? The globalists or the territorialist nationalists? From the viewpoint of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, both are wrong because both think they are the body. Whether you are a globalist or a nationalist, you think, I am this body of matter. As non-material entities, we belong neither to the globe nor to a particular nationality or territory. This is just one way that the ancient knowledge of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, can actually solve all problems. In other words, as long as we are trying to be happy materially, we're going to perpetuate an illusion of, I am the body, you are the body, let's be happy in that way. This is like searching for water in the desert. Now sometimes, as you're wandering through the desert, you may encounter one drop of water. Similarly, the yoga texts explain, as we wander through material existence in these bodies of matter, minds of matter, sometimes we encounter a drop of happiness. Oh, we become so enthusiastic. It's here, we've got a drop of happiness. It exists. But, as you know, that drop is not enough to satisfy you. What should we be doing then if we're not pursuing material happiness? First, let's consider prominent definitions in academia of your happiness situation. In the number one position these days is the genetic theory, that at least 50% of your happiness is already predetermined by your genetic disposition. The genes have done their work. You've inherited a certain package. It's hardwired, and therefore some of you when you were babies were cheery, sunny. Others were gloomy, downcast. Well, geneticists naturally favor this theory that 50% of your happiness is already predetermined by what you inherited, the genetic code that you inherited. Then, there's another 10% that is situational. But those situations are difficult to change. You can alter them, but it takes some time. Your marriage, if you marry, your job, where you live, you can change it, but it requires quite an endeavor. So we're up to 60% now. What's left for you to actually sink your teeth into and make some changes for your own happiness? 60% is out of your grasp, more or less, especially the 50% of the genetic code. You've got 40% that you can influence by your attitude, how you choose to respond. So that's the most popular theory of happiness, what you can do about your own happiness. You've got a 40% window of opportunity. The knowledge that I'm advocating, the ancient Bhakti Yoga knowledge, says you have actually 100% window of opportunity because you're not your body, you're not your genes. You're not your situations. As a non-material particle of spiritual consciousness, we're not impeded by the body, by the mind, by our social circumstances. Now sometimes persons with a, shall we say, not very compassionate outlook mistakenly say that, aha, because you can influence all of your happiness by your attitude, there's no need for any social change, there's no need for any environmental adjustment, just change your attitude. Don't worry about who has political power, economic power. This is not what the ancient Bhakti Yoga texts are saying. When there is a culture that teaches people how to control their mind and senses, how to be the master of their mind and senses, such persons will be disinclined to exploit others. When there's a culture of spiritual purification of consciousness, then there won't be this injurious competition which leads to exploitation, injustice, inequality. In other words, human beings actually have the potential for being the master of the self, master of their mind and senses. And part of that mastery, Bhagavad Gita explains, is that you're equipped with non-material knowledge. Not simply the knowledge, but also the experience that the knowledge brings. How is such a person satisfied? In genuine happiness? Such a person in an enlightened human society understands that there is non-material wisdom which leads to non-material experience. In other words, what Krishna is doing in the prime Bhakti Yoga text, Bhagavad Gita, is to invite you into the laboratory. When I'm speaking at universities, I often explain that nowhere in Bhagavad Gita does Krishna ask you to believe anything. And then so many times students breathe a sigh of relief. He's not here hawking religious beliefs. Okay. Nowhere in this jewel of yoga wisdom does Krishna ask you to believe. But everywhere in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives you laboratory techniques for verifying what is being said and experiencing it. I find that to be completely fair. And therefore, when presenting this knowledge to the world, we simply ask people, as they say in Australia, give it a fair go. Enter this Krishna conscious, this Bhakti Yoga laboratory. Apply your senses, your laboratory instruments, and see the result. If there is a process to verify our non-material identity, even though that process is not one of ordinary science, still, why not take up such lifestyle processes and see what the result is? The easiest thing is just to dismiss it all. Oh, what you're saying, Swami, is outside of science. What the ancient yoga knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is presenting is that there is a different science. It's different because it's dealing with a different energy. Now, yes, we need knowledge of both matter and we need knowledge of the non-matter. Take both side by side, but to neglect the non-material by fanatically insisting that everything is matter leads to such havoc for human society. So here, we're discussing a platform for actually renovating the entire human society based on knowledge of matter, knowledge of the non-material, and knowledge of the source of both. Knowing all that, then we can genuinely proceed to be happy. Otherwise, we could go through so many material theories of what happiness is. Other leading scholars say, happiness is when you're in the flow, when you are doing something that makes you lose track of yourself and time, and you're just, so to speak, at one with the music. You're just caught up in total absorption. That's happiness. Others say that happiness is a series of positive emotions, a sequence of positive emotions, and an overall evaluation of your life that my life is good. Now, when you ask people, are they happy, there are some barriers, some impediments when you're relying upon self-reports of happiness. Because happiness means different things to different people. So if you're a sociological researcher, a psychological researcher, and you're going around asking, are you happy right now? Do you feel happy? The answer is going to depend on the person's conceptions. It's difficult. Someone might say, I'm happy because I feel less pain than yesterday. Someone else will say, my life's been pretty bad, but I still feel optimistic about the future. That's happiness. Someone else will say that in spite of a recent tragedy that happened to me, overall, I think my life is good. That's happiness. So the definition of happiness depends on what conceptions you have. But from the viewpoint of the yogis, especially the bhakti yogis, the Krishna conscious yogis, any flavor of material happiness bewilders us and blinds us to what is the real goal of life. Now you might say, are you saying, Swami, that we should deny ourselves of anything sensory and we should just live with our hands clenched and restrained from doing anything? How are we going to be satisfied in that way? Just sealing ourselves off from everything in the quest for non-material happiness. How are we going to do that when all this good stuff is around us? You can just see yourself. Tomorrow's Friday. Friday night comes around, your friends, your mates call you up. Hey, you coming out with us tonight? Well, no, I'm striving for non-material happiness. You're never going to do that. You know, we're not the body, and you're not going to get very far in that way. So why then, when Krishna, especially when Bhagavad Gita presents Krishna as the ultimate source of pleasure, why would Krishna advocate controlling the mind and senses and restraining from indulging in material happiness and distress? Why would the unlimited reservoir of pleasure speak in that way? Krishna is the supreme psychologist. And in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that you may try to clamp down on your senses and the activities of your senses, but you will fail. If you simply try to restrict yourself, restrain yourself, deprive yourself of all kinds of stimulation, entertainment, indulgence, you're going to fail. Even if you're doing it in the name of the quest for the non-material, still you'll fail. What will make then for success? Krishna explains that when you get the higher pleasure, when you actually tap into experience of the non-material pleasure, then you'll automatically let go of the inferior, the illusory material pleasure. This is self-interest at work in the best way. When you get something better, you automatically let go of what's inferior. Otherwise, don't try to fool yourself. You're not going to do it. So what I'm proposing tonight is the mass distribution of non-material happiness. As long as there's the pursuit of material happiness, you're going to see frustration, anger, disappointment, exploitation, letdowns, because people are chasing something that is so ephemeral, it's so shadowy. It's like sitting at a campfire and trying to grab smoke. You think you've got something, you can try it. You're at a campfire, you went on an outdoor journey, and the smoke is coming from the fire, and you try to grab it. And you open your hand to see what you've got nothing. And you keep grabbing and grabbing and grabbing. The end result is simply that your arm becomes sore. So this is the pursuit of material happiness. We're neglecting our internal wealth, our non-material wealth, because we're identifying with the body and the mind as the self. And that crucial mistake sends our life spinning completely in the wrong direction. And when you have a whole society going that route, then it's no wonder that humanity has become so destructive. But then again, there's the resignation theory. Hey, look, Swami, what do you expect? Everyone's doing like that. It's an impossible tide to resist. Perhaps you might call it mass consensual trance. Billions of people working to put each other asleep because everyone's doing like this. Why not you? Who are you to resist the tide? Be practical. Be realistic. It's not your fault anyway. You didn't make the world this way. But that's just the way it is. No, we can go to a higher level if we have the right knowledge. So what I'm recommending is that 100% window of opportunity that is transcendental, beyond, in other words, your genes, beyond your circumstances, even beyond your mental attitude. I'm advocating the freedom of real pleasure seeking that is there in your non-material being, especially in its relationship with the Supreme Consciousness. We are tiny conscious entities. No one here would say that you are conscious of everything. We're limited conscious beings. The yoga texts explain that we exist in a relationship with the Supreme Conscious Entity. But we've forgotten that relationship. Our knowledge is so darkened that we can't even understand what is consciousness. There's another way how to deal with ourselves, how to deal with the ultimate source and the relationship between the two. There's a different kind of knowledge, there's a different kind of lifestyle. So finally, let me explain that there are two kinds of persons that can be happy in this world. This knowledge is coming from the graduate study to Bhagavad-Gita, an encyclopedic yoga text known as Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Śrīmad Bhāgavatam takes everything that Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita and expands upon it. So there it's explained that only two kinds of persons can be happy in this world. The first type, well, let's see what category we might fit in. The first category is the completely enlightened person, whose existence is far beyond material illusion, who understands completely the non-material identity and the relationship with the supreme conscious identity. That kind of person can actually be happy, even though in the material world. That kind of person is in the world, but not of the world. Then, there's the other kind of person. Perhaps most of you would say you're not in the enlightened category. So what's the other category, Swami? I beg and pray that you're not in this other category. The other category is the complete materialistic fool. What I don't know won't hurt me. Don't try to confuse me with the facts. My mind's made up. Work hard, party hard. Get it while you can. One body, one lifetime, one opportunity. Just work hard and please your senses. I hope you're not in that category. In that category, you never worry about what might be beyond. Okay, hopefully you'll say you're not in that category. So, we're not completely enlightened, and we're not a complete materialistic fool. What does that mean then for our happiness? This Krishna conscious text explains that everyone in between suffers a bit. Because we're not completely enlightened, and we're not a complete materialistic fool. If you were a complete materialistic fool, you wouldn't be here tonight. The fact that you're here shows you're interested. There must be something more. So you're in the in-between category. In between being enlightened and in between being a complete materialistic fool. That means there's anxiety. We may try to absorb ourselves in hedonism. We may try to absorb ourselves in just entertaining ourselves literally to death, but no. After a while you start to wonder, is there something more than this? What's really going on? I mean, who are we really? I mean, really? Yes, that's the situation of most of us. That situation means we need to make further progress. And that further progress in actual happiness, sustainable happiness, can happen based on the right knowledge. The right knowledge leads to the right lifestyle. So really, this ancient science of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, is about lifestyle management. How to live in such a way that even though you have a body of matter, you have a mind of matter, and you're in a world predominated by matter, still you can act according to your real identity, your spiritual identity, and make progress in reconnecting with the supreme spiritual identity. This is the topmost knowledge. This is the highest science for a human being. And in pursuing this topmost knowledge and highest science, the human being, you and I, get the topmost satisfaction in a way that's least destructive for the planet, for other species, for the environment, and for future generations. We've been hiding in unnatural happiness too long. It's the title of my latest book. The happiness that we're taking to be so important is an illusion. We're like the animal, the deer. Out of foolishness, we neglect water that's right at our feet because it's hidden by clumps of grass. And as a foolish deer, we race out into the desert looking for water. So what is that water that's right at our feet, apparently obscured by a little bit of grass? That water is genuine knowledge of our non-material self and the Supreme Self. It's available. The lifestyle information, how to live based on that knowledge. It's available, but because it's a little obscured by mainstream society, we neglect that precious knowledge and we race out into the desert of materialism looking for happiness and satisfaction. It's not working out. It's not working out politically, it's not working out economically, it's not working out environmentally. We need an alternative. And therefore I advocate the comprehensive system of yoga knowledge, particularly Bhakti Yoga knowledge, the yoga of pure love and devotion, as the actual purpose of human life. We ask you to become familiar with this knowledge and even give it a fair go, dare to apply it. You'll see an extraordinary transformation, both individually and collectively. Thank you very much.